The following scenario is hypothetical and presented for educational and entertainment purposes. 10 seconds into watching a forest floor in New Guinea, you might think you've stumbled onto the set of a tiny alien art gallery. There are rows of blue bottle caps, polished beetle wings, berries arranged like jewels, even bits of plastic stolen from human camps. And standing at the center of this strange museum is a bird the size of a pigeon, pacing nervously beside a structure made from carefully placed sticks. At first glance, it looks like a messy nest, but it isn't a nest, it's a stage. And the bird is about to perform one of the strangest courtship rituals in the animal kingdom. Bowerbirds are not famous for their songs. They are not known for spectacular feathers like peacocks. Evolution, apparently unimpressed by flashy plumage, handed them a different assignment: become architects, interior designers, and illusionists. The male builds a structure called a bower. Imagine two parallel walls of twigs forming a small corridor. It looks simple, but the real magic begins in front of it. The male spends days, sometimes weeks, collecting objects from the surrounding forest. Bright berries, shiny stones, blue flowers, beetle shells that glimmer like tiny mirrors. He sorts them by color, by brightness, sometimes even by size. Already this seems strange. Animals decorate nests occasionally, sure, but the bower is not used for eggs. No chicks will ever hatch there. The structure exists for only one purpose: persuasion. When a female arrives, she does not immediately choose a partner. She watches, quietly, critically, like a museum curator judging a suspicious modern art exhibit. And here's where things become scientifically fascinating. Some species of bowerbird arrange their decorations so precisely that they create an optical illusion. The objects closest to the female viewing point are small. The ones farther away are larger. To the bird's eye, the entire display appears uniform in size, creating a perfectly balanced visual field. This trick is known in human art as forced perspective. Yes, a bird. Building perspective illusions. Researchers studying this behavior discovered that the males who arrange their decorations with the most precise gradients are often the most successful at attracting mates. In other words, females prefer males who can manipulate visual perception. Now pause for a moment, because this detail quietly cracks open a bigger question. If instinct alone controlled the process, every bower would look roughly the same. But they don't. Some males experiment, some fail. Some rebuild repeatedly as if dissatisfied with their own work. Young birds often make terrible displays at first, placing objects randomly. Only with experience do they begin to refine their arrangements. Learning is happening here. Which leads to a slightly unsettling thought. Somewhere in a rainforest clearing, a bird might be standing back from his stick corridor, examining the layout of blue shells and berries, and thinking, perhaps not in words, but in some cognitive form, something very close to design. But decoration is only the first layer of the performance, because when the female finally steps closer to inspect the display, the male doesn't simply wait for approval. He begins a show that turns this quiet forest stage into something much stranger. And the props he chooses next suggest that the illusion was only the opening act. The moment the female steps closer to inspect the carefully arranged display, the atmosphere shifts from quiet architecture to theatrical performance. The male, who moments ago looked like a nervous interior decorator, suddenly transforms into something closer to a stage magician. He begins by selecting props. Yes, props. From the piles of objects surrounding the bower, the male chooses specific items and holds them in his beak. A bright berry, a blue feather, sometimes even a piece of colorful plastic scavenged from human trash. He doesn't just show them randomly, he presents them, one by one, almost like a street performer revealing tricks to a skeptical audience. Scientists who have filmed these displays notice something curious. The male often hides behind the twig walls of the bower while performing, only partially visible to the female watching from the front. From her viewpoint, the decorations form a visual stage, while the male pops in and out of sight holding different objects. The effect is oddly similar to puppetry. The female stands still, observing everything. If she loses interest, she simply flies away. For the male, this is the evolutionary equivalent of bombing on stage in front of the harshest critic imaginable, and she is extremely harsh. Studies show that females may visit dozens of bowers before choosing a mate. Some males will spend months maintaining their display area only to be rejected repeatedly. Others become wildly successful, attracting visitor after visitor, like a popular art gallery in the middle of the rainforest. But the story grows even stranger when scientists start watching what happens when nobody else is around. Male bowerbirds are notorious thieves. If a neighboring male builds a particularly impressive display, another bird may sneak over while he's gone and steal his best decorations. Blue objects are especially prized in some species, leading to what researchers politely call decoration raids. Though from a bird's perspective, it probably feels more like an art heist. Hidden cameras have captured scenes that look almost comically strategic. One bird waits quietly until the owner leaves. Then, quick dash, grab the shiny shell, escape back to his own bower like a feathery jewel thief. But theft isn't the only form of sabotage. Some males will deliberately destroy a rival's bower. They rip apart the twig corridor, scatter decorations, and leave the display in ruins. Imagine spending weeks building a delicate illusion only to have a jealous competitor bulldoze the entire project overnight. What makes this behavior fascinating from a scientific standpoint is that it suggests something beyond simple instinctual routines. These birds are monitoring competitors, they are responding to social environments, they are adjusting their strategies. In behavioral science, this begins to look suspiciously like social intelligence. Because if a male notices that his rival is attracting more females and he chooses to sabotage that rival's display, he is responding to information. He is making decisions based on outcomes. And outcomes matter enormously in the world of bowerbirds. Females remember. Research indicates that females may revisit specific bowers multiple times, observing how the display changes over days or weeks. A male who improves his decorations or refines his illusion may gain favor. One who lets his display deteriorate might lose attention entirely. So the rainforest floor becomes something like an evolving gallery of experiments. Every bower is a hypothesis. Every decoration arrangement is a visual test. Every performance is a behavioral trial. And somewhere in this strange competition of twigs and berries, evolution is quietly selecting not just beauty, but creativity. Which raises a question that makes many scientists slightly uncomfortable. Because if birds are capable of learning aesthetic tricks, stealing artistic resources, sabotaging competitors, and improving their visual illusions over time, then the line between instinct and something more flexible begins to blur. And the deeper researchers look into these performances, the more it starts to feel like the male isn't just decorating a stage, he's manipulating perception itself. The deeper scientists examined these performances, the more uncomfortable the question became. Is the male bowerbird simply decorating, or is he deliberately controlling what the female sees? Because the illusion on the forest floor is not accidental. Researchers studying species like the satin bowerbird began measuring the exact placement of every object in the display court. What they found was startlingly precise. The smallest items were placed closest to the female's viewing position. Slightly larger objects were positioned farther away, then larger still. A perfect size gradient stretching across the ground. From the female's perspective, the entire collection appears strangely uniform, as if every decoration were the same size. In visual science, this is a textbook case of forced perspective. Human architects and filmmakers use the same trick to manipulate depth perception. Ancient temples were built with slight distortions to appear symmetrical from a distance. Movie sets shrink objects in the background to make spaces feel enormous. But here, deep in the rainforest, a bird with a brain smaller than a walnut is performing a comparable manipulation of geometry. And when scientists experimentally disrupted the illusion by rearranging the objects so the gradient disappeared, the males reacted almost immediately. They rushed out, inspected the court, and began rearranging the decorations until the visual pattern returned. It was as if the bird could detect that something looked wrong. This discovery sparked one of the more intriguing debates in animal cognition. Does the male understand the illusion, or is he following a learned rule that accidentally produces the effect? At first glance, instinct seems like the easy answer. Evolution often encodes complex behavior without conscious awareness. But the evidence refuses to stay simple. Young males are terrible designers. Their bowers look chaotic. Decorations are scattered randomly, the size gradient is inconsistent, and the viewing court lacks symmetry. Females rarely show interest in these amateur constructions. But as the birds age, something changes. Older males begin producing increasingly precise layouts. They adjust object placement repeatedly. They experiment with different materials. Some even remove decorations that clash with the overall color pattern. In certain species, males strongly prefer blue objects, flowers, berries, feathers, bits of plastic bottle caps. The result is a stage that looks like it was curated by an extremely opinionated, minimalist interior designer. What's fascinating is that this preference isn't universal across all species of bowerbird. Some species prefer green. Others focus on white shells or pale stones. The aesthetic rules vary, which hints at something evolutionary biologists find extremely interesting: culture. Not human culture, of course, but behavioral traditions that spread through learning rather than genetics. Young males often build their bowers near older, successful individuals. Over time, they appear to imitate aspects of those displays. Decoration style spreads locally. In one region, the bowers might emphasize symmetry. In another, height. In another, elaborate object collections. The rainforest becomes a patchwork of aesthetic trends. This begins to sound suspiciously like fashion. And fashion, in the biological sense, is a powerful evolutionary force, because female choice drives everything here. The males are not building illusions for survival. The bowers provide no shelter, no food, no protection. They are building them because females prefer them. In other words, the entire artistic arms race exists because someone, somewhere in the distant evolutionary past, decided that a well-decorated illusion looked impressive. And that preference reshaped the behavior of an entire lineage of birds. But the true climax of the performance happens at the exact moment when the female finally approaches the entrance of the bower. Because this is when the illusion, the stage, and the strange puppet show all combine into a single high-stakes moment. The male steps forward. The decorations shimmer in the filtered rainforest light. The forced perspective flattens the display into a perfectly balanced field of color. The female watches from the precise viewing point where the illusion works best, and then the male begins the most frantic dance of his life, which, scientifically speaking, may determine whether weeks of architectural genius end in evolutionary success or total romantic disaster. By the time the female finally steps to the entrance of the bower, the entire clearing has become a carefully engineered theater. The illusion is aligned. The decorations are perfectly arranged. The male is hidden just behind the twig corridor, holding a bright object like a magician preparing his final trick. This is the moment everything has been leading toward. The male suddenly bursts into motion. He hops, whirs, spreads his wings, shakes the object in his beak, then darts sideways behind the twig walls. A flash of color appears, then disappears, then reappears somewhere else. From the female's viewpoint, the movements are fast, dramatic, and framed by the walls of the bower like a tiny stage. The dance looks chaotic to us, but high-speed video recordings show that it is anything but random. Each species of bowerbird has its own choreography. Some perform rapid zigzag movements. Others vibrate their wings so quickly they produce a buzzing sound. Some snap their beaks while presenting objects in rhythmic bursts. The male may alternate between several props during the performance, switching colors like a performer changing stage lights. What makes the behavior even more remarkable is that the male constantly watches the female during the display. If she leans forward, he intensifies the dance. If she shifts position, he adjusts his movements to stay visible. If she looks away, he may freeze entirely. In other words, the performance is responsive. Behavioral ecologists studying these interactions notice that males seem to modify their displays in real time based on the female's reactions. The best performers do not simply repeat the same sequence. They adapt. And adaptation matters because females are extremely cautious during this stage. If the male's display becomes too aggressive, too sudden, too close, the female may panic and fly away instantly. Imagine spending weeks building an optical illusion, carefully arranging hundreds of decorations only to ruin everything by dancing a little too enthusiastically. This happens more often than you might think. Young males frequently fail at this final step. Their displays are clumsy. Their dances are poorly timed. They rush toward the female too quickly and scare her off. Researchers watching these encounters sometimes describe them with barely suppressed amusement, because the entire scene resembles an awkward first date gone catastrophically wrong. But experienced males learn restraint. They maintain distance. They control the rhythm of the dance. They time their movements so the female remains curious rather than alarmed. The result is a performance that feels uncannily theatrical. Architecture, illusion, choreography, prop management, and social awareness all converge into one brief moment of judgment. Then comes the quiet pause. The male stops moving. The forest goes still. The female steps forward into the bower corridor, inspecting the structure up close. If she approves, mating happens quickly and silently, and then, this is the truly strange part, she leaves. The male provides no parental care. He will not help raise the chicks. The female flies off to build a completely separate nest somewhere else in the forest, where she alone will incubate the eggs and raise the young, which means the bower itself has served its entire evolutionary purpose in a single interaction, a structure built purely for persuasion. And yet the mystery lingers long after the female disappears into the trees. Because what we're seeing on that rainforest floor challenges a comfortable assumption humans often make about intelligence in the natural world. We like to believe that creativity, aesthetics, and performance belong primarily to us. But here is a bird arranging color palettes, building perspective illusions, stealing decorations from rivals, sabotaging competitors, practicing choreography, and adjusting his behavior based on audience feedback, all with a brain that weighs only a few grams. So the next time someone claims that animals act only through simple instinct, it may be worth remembering a quiet clearing in the rainforest, where a tiny architect stands beside a corridor of twigs, nervously rearranging blue shells and berries. Not building a home. Building an illusion, convincing enough to change the future of his genes. And perhaps, in the process, revealing that the boundary between instinct and imagination is far stranger than we once believed.